I think it's happening. Yes, I think we're happening. It is on. It is live. We are there. It is.
Cool.
Hello. Okay, folks. Good evening and welcome to the Sydney Saxophone Network Q&A sessions. I am your host, Nathan, and hope you're having a wonderful week and evening, and hopefully a special shout out to all our friends in the teaching world. I hope the first couple of weeks back at school, face-to-face teaching, haven't been too much of a shock. I know it's sort of been a big relief for most people to be back face-to-face, but anyway, I digress. So this evening, we're going to be having a chat to a local jazz icon in the saxophone world and the jazz music world, of course, Tim Clarkson. Now, Tim Clarkson, for those who don't know, is an absolutely legendary saxophone player. He's worked with, the who's who of people. He's worked with, the likes of, where's my list? I'll have to get a list because I couldn't remember them all face to face. But you got people like, the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, of course, where he played with George Benson, the Tempations, blues legend Russell Jackson, Bob Stannard, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, with the BB King crew. And just so many other people. And of course, locally he's working, with the Panichi Big Band, Dan Barnett Big Band, Greasy Chicken, and of course his own trio, the Tim Clarkson Trio. But let's talk to the man himself. So this evening I'd like to welcome Tim Clarkson. Tim, welcome.
Good evening, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me. It's I feel that the bio is as we always feel is says more nice things to me about me than I really feel. I'm just sort of out there doing the thing, But it's it's great to have a chat.
Oh, no worries. I've just got a bit of a comment here that I've got a bit of buzzing going on there. That could possibly be my neighbour's air conditioning unit. The soundproofing here is not great, so I do apologise for that. The studio here in my spare room isn't top shelf, unfortunately, but hopefully you can still hear us loud and clear. But anyway, just for those who are tuning in here, I'd like to just extend an open invitation. If you do want to have a chat and ask a question of Tim, you are more than welcome to. You just feel free to put it up in the YouTube chat and I'll read it out as we go along. But anyway, let's hear from Tim, and we're going to open up with a nice, easy question. What made you pick the saxophone?
I didn't.
Oh, that's a controversial answer.
I saw that one and I thought, well, I've actually got an interesting answer to that one. I sort of fell into the saxophone. I had some piano lessons when I was 5-ish or something like that, because I was jealous of my older sister, and not for sort of much more reason than that. School band program, year 3 or thereabouts came along, and at the time, because I went to school in country Queensland, and this was in Toowoomba, and though I had a lot of music in the house, I wasn't across a lot of things, and there was trumpet or saxophone, and they lost my form, and I couldn't for the life of me remember whether I wrote down trumpet or saxophone. She said, "What did you write down on the form?" And I went, "I think it was saxophone. What's the difference?" And she said, "Well, that's all right. We've run out of trumpets, so saxophone it is."
Oh wow! Okay.
It was all an accident, but thankfully I've fallen in love and stayed in love with the saxophone, so that's it. It worked out okay.
Nice. So a happy accident, should we say?
Yeah. Proof that sometimes just life throws you stuff and you just got to roll with it.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Now, do you want to tell us a little bit about your early days on the saxophones? Like maybe
Sure.
who are your early teachers, talking all the way up to university, and, where did you end up studying? So obviously not originally from Sydney, but you ended up here. So how did you what was your journey to getting from there to here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that I started off in, a pretty bulk standard primary school concert band program in country Queensland and in Toowoomba, and it was pretty kind of slow going for a while. It took me a while to get to high school before I sort of was exposed to a little bit more music. I was exposed to a bunch of stuff at home, lots of Chopin and Beethoven from Dad, and lots of Phil Collins and the Beatles from Mum, and a little bit of big band music in there, but not much. Eventually started to stretch my legs at high school, and I think Yeah, interestingly enough, I mean, I had some great conductors and some great sort of teachers. I was fortunate enough to go to a high school, Toowoomba State High, that has had at the time a very good but underfunded high school program with a fair few ensembles. Some great conductors, some really powerful sort of early influences. Beautiful conductor by the name of Edward Kennedy up in Toowoomba, who's now in Brisbane. And yeah, I really only discovered jazz because I was pretty much a dot reader, and very much struggled to have any kind of connection between my ears and the saxophone. It wasn't like I always had a calling for jazz. Once I discovered jazz, I really loved it, but that kind of took until I was sort of 15, 16 or so, probably about 15, before I sort of heard Charlie Parker and went, "What on earth is this?" And interestingly enough, one of my school friends ended up going down to Brisbane on a pretty regular basis because he was an excellent improviser and a bit of a jazz legend. Ben Savage, I don't know if you remember Ben Savage.
Yeah.
Savage by name, savage by nature. we grew up in Toowoomba together, racing sailing boats and bumming around the place and playing a lot of saxophone. And so he was having lessons down in Brisbane with Cole Lockman. Yep. Driving up and down from Toowoomba to Brisbane, and a lot of my sort of early information on jazz was sort of filtered secondhand through Ben, and it was this very sort of hodgepodge kind of process. And then eventually, I ended up going to some of the jazz works band camps up in Queensland, run by the Quigleys, who now run JMA. In Brisbane. And they were very influential. So I had like 1 week a year where I would be exposed to a bunch of improvising and a bunch of workshops with the likes of, oh my gosh, Tony Buchanan, Dale Barlow, Craig Scott, Paul McNamara, Vince Genova, like real sort of upper echelon, mind blowing. John Hoffman.
Nice.
And that was really kind of the beginning of cracking the window open on improvisation for me, and it took me quite a while to sort of walk through that door. It took me a little while to wrap my head around that. But then once I went and studied a year of science before I did music at the University of Queensland, very rapidly figured out that though I have an amazing interest in science and a passion for it, which I still do, that I didn't want to be a scientist. I felt the same way about being in a lab as most people feel about practicing their scales. So I was happy to practice my scales as long as I didn't have to repeat one more experiment in the lab. I thought, well, maybe that's trying to tell me something. So I ended up down at the Conservatorium down in Sydney. And yeah, teachers wise, sort of through that journey, and I started off with Cole Lockman. Really sort of helped me work on a lot of sound and a lot of basics, and kind of get a lot of my groundwork fixed because it needed some fixing. Gordon Brisker, Dale Barlow, and then the real linchpin for me was fourth year when I got to study with Paul McNamara on piano, and he was really the guy who made a huge impression in terms of cracking open what it means to be an improviser, and really kind of getting to the heart of the matter, and all the sort of left brain versus right brain, and how to get meticulously into things, but then also unlock the creative juices at the same time. So he was a pretty profound influence through that time. But in terms of musical exposure through there, I've got to say that probably when I was about that age, 15, 16, was when my sister came back from a music festival and exposed me to the Mara Band and the Martinitsa Choir, which was a huge discovery, sort of, Bulgarian choir, and this incredible, and I thought, oh man, these horn players, like, what is this? This is incredible. And then finally, eventually I looked at the liner notes and went, oh, it's all my greatest Australian jazz heroes. No wonder I like it in the horn section. And also the Tuvan throat singing group, Hunhurtu, which was way out of left field for me, and I absolutely fell in love with sort of Tuvan throat singing, and had a much more visceral experience of a bunch of non-Western music than I had with a bunch of Western music, I think.
Nice. So quite an eclectic musical upbringing, should we say?
Very, very eclectic.
Very nice. And you also, I believe, you pursued a few studies overseas as well. Just maybe some lessons and things. Who are some of the people that you checked out across the pond?
Yeah, absolutely. So I probably the one of the big interests was the music of Dave Binney, and also the alto sax player David Binney, and of Mark Turner. I've been a huge fan of Mark Turner's for a long time. I did my master's research on Mark Turner. So a few shorter trips to New York, and then eventually with a study grant, sort of a longer few months in New York. And geez, who did I have lessons? So I spent a little bit of time with Mark, a little bit of time with David Binney, and a smattering of others like Donny McCaslin, Mark Juliana, the drummer, and just trying to think. A couple of other bits and pieces, couple of other sort of heroes along the way that I managed to get them to relinquish a little bit of their time for me.
Nice.
Was that pretty much what you're asking?
Hey, yep, pretty much. Yeah. So when you've studied with a whole array of amazing players and musicians, and I'm sure you would have gotten a lot out of every single one of them, and pick their brains on the ins and outs of improvisation, harmony, playing technique, all that sort of thing. What this could be a little bit of a challenging one because there are so many amazing teachers out there. But who were some of the more particular mentors that really stuck out for you, and why do they stick out for you to this day?
Yeah. Look, I'd say the big one is Paul McNamara. I've said a little bit there already, but because he really took the time to understand precisely where I was at. We talked learning styles. We talked, about sort of, a lot of stuff that has sort of helped me a lot in sort of my own teaching and my own pedagogy. Really met me where I was at. Really was honest with me about these are your strengths. Yes, you have strengths. At the time, I had a lot of doubts. A bit of a slow comer to the to a lot of things in jazz, but really met me where I was at. Really broke things down and went, these are your strengths. This is how we expand your strengths. These are your weaknesses. This is how we're going to address your weaknesses. And then really stretched me in a way that I felt, he got me. And so I've tried to, get my students in that way. In terms of teachers, mentors, Lou and Mara from the Mara band have ended up becoming, huge sort of mentors of mine through spending a lot of time with them. It's kind of like my adopted parents on the road. And I've learned a lot from them about, obviously other cultures, other ways of doing music, other ways of being. But they, besides being incredibly decorated musicians, they are passionate about education, about people, about interfacing with every person that they play to. They get as much joy out of playing to a 2-year-old child, someone with a profound intellectual disability, someone with from a completely different cultural background, as much joy out of all of those things as they get playing for knowledgeable audiences and playing amazing art music and that kind of thing. And I'd say with the time that I spent with Mark Turner, I'm not sure if I'd say mentor because I've only had sort of a bit of a stint there with him.
True. But you did the whole master's research project was based on his music, so I guess maybe not directly per se, but definitely an influence on you.
Well, I ended up going and spending a couple of months with him in New York, and that was huge because apart from, I think what I really got from him, apart from loads of technical and harmonic information and just understanding how he got to be the player that he is and what his process is, and getting some insight on that. I think the big thing that I got from him overall was just how seriously he takes the pursuit of music, and how much effort, thought, listening, curiosity, investigation, application of piano and guitar ideas and pulling them apart and fitting them on the saxophone, and really getting inside the nitty-gritty of every bit of voice leading, of every construction of every line, and just sort of showing me just how deep you can delve, and also helping connect me with the tradition, the profound traditions in jazz, and just how deep those connections go into, as an art form, and what a sort of a mantle that is musically to sort of to try and participate in is really sort of connecting with that history and that sense of investigation.
Cool. Now I've got another challenging one for you, but one thing I want to ask is, and you might have answered this already, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit. What would you say is one of the most, or maybe there's a couple of the most valuable lessons that you learnt, or the most sort of light bulb moment that you've had working with some of these teachers and mentors and things like that? And what's the thing that sort of like really sticks to you to this day?
Oh, there's so many things. Yeah, it is a very tough question.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. So, I mean, there's lots of individual light bulb moments with bits of of technique, of physical connection, of throat position, of understanding how different types of harmony works, particularly in the sort of the more modern jazz circles. But I think ultimately the lessons that have really struck home, and that are really the important ones, are not the specific information. It's all about the why. It's all about why you do the thing, and a lot of that has to do with listening. So I think some of the biggest lessons that stick with me are just to listen, and listen really deeply. And when you think that you've listened, and you've listened a lot, then listen some more. Listen first, play second. Still trying to learn that one. And I think, and this comes partly from teaching and having been taught, and it also comes from just living it and doing it, and being on stage and just collaborating with people. Is just a sense of finding yourself in the music. And by that I mean it takes a very long time, I think, for anybody, for most people, not everybody, most people, to develop their unique artistic voice, whatever that means. And I think the most profound part of that process is just learning to be yourself. So learning the lesson that I will never be this person, or that I will never be that person, and that's okay, and I've got my own unique, special snowflake thing going on in my slightly strange brain, and that what I need to pursue more than anything else is just being me, and I mean that in a very broad sense, like me in the world, and then as a byproduct of that, me on the saxophone, or me composing music, or doing whatever it is. I think that's the biggest stuff. Okay. Yeah. And I really enjoy helping other people find their trajectory with that, and going, that's right, you only have to be you. You don't have to be anybody else, and that includes what you choose to practice each day. You pursue your interests and find your thing that you're into, and don't the deeper you go, the more stuff you can't do. The more stuff is off the list. The more stuff you got to leave by the wayside and go, man, it's endless. It's endless. 1,000 lifetimes isn't enough to even begin to scratch the surface of it all. So just choose what is meaningful for you and pursue that and discover along the way.
Yep. Spot on. It's music's such a personal and unique journey for everyone. Like everyone who studies music, no matter what field or whatever, they're always, no two people are going to have the exact same experiences when they're doing it, and that's very important to remember. It's not a copy paste field. It's a very organic process, I guess, learning music.
Yeah, and allowing space for other people to have their experiences too.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's really easy to be frustrated that somebody's not on the same page as you are, but in the same way that you'd like room to connect in your way to the music that you're trying to make or that you're trying to help produce, or whatever it is. Allowing that space for other people to do the same, and allowing for the fact that they're not at where you're at, and finding the points of connection, finding the points of commonality, which is ultimately about community building.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nice one. All right, so moving on to a different area altogether. Again, you might have touched up on some of this, particularly in your younger years, and some influential people that you've heard. But maybe you could talk about more of your current musical influences, or at least some of your all-time favorite musical influences, and why are they influential for you?
Whew. Yeah, that's a big one.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I have pretty sort of eclectic tastes. So, I mean, what I enjoy, I enjoy listening to a vast array of music, and then choose a few select things stylistically to actually work on, because there's too much good stuff out there. Biggest musical influences. Look, I think on the saxophone, I kind of can't get past Mark Turner as, if you hear me play the saxophone and you've heard Mark Turner, you go, well, he doesn't sound like John Coltrane. He definitely sounds like something else. That's probably my biggest sort of single sort of jazz influence. Influential music, man, there's so much.
Or maybe even things you're currently listening to or into at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Current influences. Look, I'm sort of trying to expand both directions. Like, I'm trying to dig deeper into sort of New Orleans tradition. I've had a trip to Cuba and discovered the joys of Cuban music, and that's been sort of I'm not a proficient in it by any stretch of the imagination, but that's been a sort of a big process of sort of delving through some of those musical roots. So Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Johnny Hodges, whole Afro-Cuban tradition, delving in that direction. And then in the other direction, I'm sort of expanding my horizons with listening to some Ligeti.
Oh, yeah.
And some Dan Tepfer on piano, who is also into Ligeti. I'm doing a reasonable amount of collaboration with Steve Barry on some stuff at the moment, and so his sense of harmony is absolutely profound and terrifying. And so he's sort of a bigger influence on the harmonic trajectory at the moment, I think. And I'm delving back into some Coltrane that I haven't listened to for a while, some of which is going to come up in the academic work. Oh my gosh, I got a whole shelf of stuff there. Dave Matthews Band.
Oh, yeah?
Yep, love Dave
Nice.
Matthews Band. Who else? I'm just having a bit of a mental block. I've been listening to a whole bunch of new improvisers that I haven't checked out before, but I'm drawing a blank on names.
That's okay.
Trying to extend my listening sort of both of those directions, and yeah.
No, it sounds nice.
Tuxim Trio. Oh my gosh.
Tuxim Trio.
Tuxim Trio is one of the greatest proponents of Arabic music. They are just absolutely phenomenal. Just some of the most beautiful virtuosic improvisers on the face of the planet, and
Cool.
Yeah.
How do you spell that? I might check that out.
I'll get this wrong. Tuxim. Taksim, I think. There's possibly some kind of accent in there or something as well.
Taxim.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, cool. I'll definitely check that out. Something easy listening for, check out. Nice. All right. Now, for those playing at home, we're having a chat to Tim Clarkson. If you do have any questions for Tim, feel free to pop them in the chat on the right-hand side of the stream, and I'll read them out as we go along. But whilst we're waiting for a few questions, if you do have any, we'll just proceed and keep asking questions. Now, this next question is sort of a bit of an obligatory saxophone question, being a saxophone Facebook page. And
I'm assuming we're talking about reeds.
Almost, well, it's gear basically. So one of the things I'm starting to do this year in adding is, one of the things people, 90% of people, well, it's a bit of a generalization, but a lot of people who join, saxophone groups and things definitely like to talk about gear. But, to satisfy people's curiosity, what's your current setup and equipment that you're using?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I agree with the question, because it's like the number one frustrating thing if you're just trying to, if you're trying to get into sort of a particular area or go, how do I make that sound? I can spend waste so much time and energy. If I just had any idea what anybody else is playing on it, would give me a place to start.
Yep.
So do you want horns or just mouthpieces? And
let's go everything. Yeah.
All right. So the tenor sax that's sitting beside, I've got a lot of instruments. You can't really.
Oh, hectic! I saw a flute there. That looks dangerous.
Yeah, there's soprano, alto, all sorts of things down there. So I'm very, very, very fortunate to have a almost matching pair of super balanced action tenor and alto.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those I play Ted Klum mouthpieces.
Oh yeah.
I think the fairly generic sort of alto model, which does great, and the the Florida blue and black marbled one on tenor, which I really love the sound of.
Okay, is that a Link copy kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Ted Klum's copy of a Link, and there's a couple of other mouthpiece manufacturers out there who I would trust to do that as well. I believe Matt Morance's mouthpieces in New York do a very similar thing, and I think there's somebody else, but Ted Klum's mouthpieces, whether they're exactly your bag or not, they play amazingly. Like, they just, because he's one of the best mouthpiece refaces in the world, so when he decided to do his own line of mouthpieces, they don't really get out the factory without him looking over them, so they always play great. I play very moderate sizes. I think both of those are a size 7. Sometimes I play 6 on alto, but I think that's a 7 at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I play a reasonably hard setup on tenor. Hardish. Depends how in shape I am. Let's be frank. I like to go pretty hard on the tenor, but not so much on the other horns. I just don't find it works so well. Just my sound, my face, that mouthpiece on tenor.
Right.
I also play a Guy Hawkins.
Oh yeah.
There's vintage 1960s Guy Hawkins, which is it's not quite the same as a slant signature auto link, but it's in a similar vein. If you can find one of the vintage rubber ones, they are very hard to find. I found one in the second-hand bin at Billy Hyde's before they shut down.
Oh wow!
For $80.
That is a real bargain.
And it desperately needed refacing. It was not in very playable condition, but I found one and I got it done up, and it was amazing too. So it's a similar kind of thing.
Nice.
So soprano, I think that's another size 7 mouthpiece. I've got a Yanagisawa soprano with a Maya.
Oh yeah.
I think it's a Maya size. Actually, it might be Maya size 6
Mm-hmm.
on it. Clarinet, I have an old Lamargue, like pre-LeBlanc.
Oh wow.
With a Van Doren B45.
Classic.
But I found a decent one.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always play perfectly, but that one does.
Nope.
Flute is Haynes Q1.
Oh yeah.
A very nice flute, sort of silver plated body, but with all the schwanky keywork.
Mm-hmm.
Barry sax, there's a couple of things not here. I've got Barry sax I've got an intermediate Keelworth, does the job with an auto link on the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And very fortunate to find for a reasonable price, I got a second-hand Selma bass clarinet, which does me very nicely. Now the mouthpiece for the bass clarinet is a Walter Grabner.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, for those playing at home who are into Charles Bay mouthpieces for jazz related, or jazz or klezmer type related, the sort of the vintage auto link of the bass clarinet world. I haven't done a huge amount of research on bass clarinet mouthpieces, but the Walter Grabner seems to be the main competition for a vintage Charles Bay, and that's a very nice mouthpiece. It plays really, really nicely.
Yeah, no, I've got one of those. It's a Laurie Bloom, I think it is. But yeah, it's like it's a Zinner blank, and he like hand finishes them all and custom, and yeah, they're beautiful.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
very
nice. Cool. All right. Well, that's enough of the the geeky. We had to get that out of the way. I'm sorry, folks. But yeah, if you did have any questions, do pop it in the chat there, and I'll read it out as we go. But as you can see, Tim has a very extensive collection of instruments there, and yes, he
Owner
plays
of
them.
many things.
Owner of many things and plays them very well. Now, let's talk about your playing. Speaking of listening and playing, you work with some fantastic musicians, as we mentioned a bit earlier, and you're working with some great ensembles. But first of all, let's talk about like your own sort of solo projects. Now, one of the most prominent things that you're currently working on that we were chatting about before is actually the Tim Clarkson Trio as the band leader per se, and it's a group that you've had for a couple of years, I believe, and you've been able to sort of tour overseas and do some amazing gigs and stuff. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the key players in the trio that you currently have or have had in the past, the artistic direction that you're sort of aiming for with the group, and what sort of gigs and things you've done so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, all the members of the trio, we've all played around the place and overseas and various things. I haven't actually taken I haven't actually taken that trio overseas.
Okay.
But it has been my main creative project since 2007.
Oh yeah.
Sort of been the sort of the long. That's been like the one that sort of continued through while other things have sort of come and gone. So it is very much based around Cameron Reid on the drums. And forgive me if I forget to answer half a question. Just prompt me again.
Yep, we'll do.
I get sidetracked easily. Cameron Reid on the drums. We went to the con together. He's been bestest of mates for a very long time. We started off. The current bass player in the trio is Dave Groves, who also went to the con. Incredible bass player, now clinical psychologist, but but still amazing bass player. Yeah.
So he doesn't analyze you guys in rehearsals or anything, does he?
Well, he won't tell me what the results are, that's for sure. I don't want to know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but my trio started off with Alex Bonham on the double bass. So got Alex when he was 19, and then gradually lost him to places like the Thelonious Monk Institute, and playing with people like Chris Potter.
Yeah, he's doing pretty well for himself.
Yeah, he has had a stellar trajectory. He is a monster. So once Alex took off, Brendan Clark has played for a while. A few spot appearances by people like Hannah James and Jonathan Schwartz at various points, and then Dave's Tom Botting, I think, briefly.
Oh yeah.
And then but Dave's been sort of my guy for the last little while. Currently sitting on an album that's recorded but hasn't been released because I'm just waiting for the stress levels to go down and for things to clear. And which fingers crossed, 2022. This is hopefully in the next few months we'll be out there and gigging that album. That'd be nice.
Nice.
Sorry, what else did you ask me? I forgot.
Oh, I was just going to say, what sort of the what was the artistic direction per se? Was it something that you just like a vehicle for you to sort of work on your original music, or was there some other concept behind it? Or
yeah, absolutely. Look, along the Mark Turner lines, you can't go past the Fly Trio with Larry Grenadier and Jeff Ballard with Mark Turner in that trio. So that was definitely sort of a very like an early inspiration. But what the thing that I like about that trio that has sort of been is sort of the big picture concept that I really enjoy working with is just trying to explore what's possible with saxophone, double bass, and drums. And stretch it to its limits and sort of explore, all the things that you can do with that instrumentation. Because without a chordal instrument, it is very wide open, it is very spacious, it is very terrifying. And sometimes I write quite complex chord progressions for myself, and then I go, "There's no chordal player. Why did I?" But that's what I'm hearing. So the way that I tend to compose for the trio, the way I usually describe it is it's less like, if you think sort of classic Sonny Rollins trio, it's less like a rhythm section where the piano player forgot to show up. Everybody's swinging hard and soloist, saxophone goes nuts on the top. It tends to be, I tend to write the tunes a little bit more like bass and saxophone two-part counterpoint.
Okay.
Sometimes with very together ideas, sometimes very interlocking ideas, codependent ideas, sometimes very independent ideas that sort of, pull at each other, and the drums tend to either tend to be the glue that holds it together, and either sort of bridge between the two, or sort of side with one or side with the other, or sort of, reinforce the sort of the structural points. So, I try to think about it a little bit more like it's like two-part counterpoint with a lot of rhythm going on as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, artistically, try to explore a range of different grooves and just give that instrumentation room to breathe and room to explore, and just sort of, push it in, in the spacious direction, in really slow tempos, in faster tempos, in just all the different ways that those parts can interlock and people can play solo. It's great in a band like that to just have moments where, so for instance, we have sometimes improvised introductions to the tunes, and all we know is that it's a drum intro, and it'll be, sometimes it's 10 seconds, sometimes it's a minute and a half, sometimes it's 5 minutes, who knows. But giving the guys space to explore, and trying to also give them some kind of ownership over that direction. Like, I'm not particularly precious with the compositions. If something's not working, I'm just like, cool, let's just chop that section. Or and the longer that time's gone on, I've really enjoyed sort of connecting more intimately with audiences, and really kind of responding to what they want to hear. And I mean, that sort of culminated a little bit in a series of, we helped launch back pre-COVID days, launch Airbnb concerts. In Sydney. We were sort of one of the early bands to sort of help start that, and we had a fantastic run of gigs there for a while, where we sort of made things really intimate with the audience. We had a Q&A in the middle of the gig, and we sometimes gave them dibs on what we'd do. We give them options, option A, option B, option C. They'd always choose the hardest one and sort of make us work for it. It was great. Really sort of invite people in and bring them into the music a bit more.
Nice one. So it sounds like it's a very sort of collaborative ensemble, and you all sort of bounce off each other, and everyone gets to have a bit of a say on the musical, sort of the direction of the music as it's going along, and also, I guess, working with the same musicians over a period of time. And sort of speaking from my experiences working with a group for 20 years now, but that's another story. You kind of get to know the ins and outs of those players, and
pretty good group too.
Yeah, we go all right. No,
we go all right.
Yeah, we go all right.
They're faster than I do.
But I mean, it's just sort of like, working with people for that long amount of time, you really do, it's sort of like, it's almost like a sixth sense that you develop, and, working in that kind of intimate chamber setting, whether it be in a jazz context or whatever, like, you really do find that you can pick up on a lot of subtleties and nuances, and almost sort of quasi predict what's going on a little bit, or maybe be taken by surprise, but can join in seamlessly on that, on the journey led by one person or another kind of thing. And it's that
sense of trust and relationship with those musicians that I really enjoy, like just knowing what they're capable of, trying to sometimes haggle them to haggle with them to push a bit, reach for the stars, and push it a bit further and all that kind of thing, and break some boundaries, but then also giving them plenty of space to do what they need to do, and really having that sense of personal trust and musical trust is sort of goes hand in hand. I really enjoy that space.
Nice. Are there any memorable gigs that you've had with the trio? Like, anything that sort of stands out as like, this is a gig that, I'm never going to forget?
It's been a few. I think, gosh, there's a few. I think the thing that really gets me about, the gigs that I've enjoyed the most, have not necessarily been the most prominent, but they've been sort of the most connected in terms of connecting with the audience. So one of those was in medium-sized sort of university theatre in my hometown. We managed to take do a regional tour and we went up to my hometown, and we had Kristen Berardi sitting in with us as
nice.
special vocal guest for a set as well. And just the my fourth grade teacher, classroom teacher, was in the audience.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool, and a whole bunch of these faces that I'm like, if you add 20 years to that person, I think I know who that is. And there was something about that particular evening that was just, there was a sense of coming home about it, and just beautiful, intimate moments in the music on stage where everything breathed, everything took its time, everything just had just the right amount of space. I think most of the most profound sort of musical experiences that I've had have been all about that connection. Whether it be with strangers, whether it be with the trio, I think that's sort of a commonality along all of those.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Now, obviously, we've got to talk about some of the other things that you're doing as well, because you are an extremely busy individual. You don't rest on your laurels, and like your musical taste, you don't necessarily stick to one thing. There's a whole array of different things and different sides to the hexagonal coin to Tim Clarkson musically. So a couple of other projects that you're currently working with are quite substantial. So one of the ones I want to talk about is actually there's a gig coming up quite soon, in fact, with this ensemble, and it's the Greasy Chicken Orchestra.
Yes, next Thursday.
Right. Can you tell us a bit about this group? So this is led by mental blank. Philip Johnson, soprano player, amazing player. But yeah, can you tell us what this group's about?
And brilliant composer and all-round, alternative thinker. He's incredible.
Yes. Was it he does the scores for the short films? I think there's a couple
for silent film. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
That's his actual. Well, if you ask Philip what his real speciality is, it's writing scores for silent film, and in particular, I mean, he's done a whole bunch, but in particular Japanese silent film as well.
Nice.
Yeah. Brilliant composer. So so Philip runs. There's two different ensembles of Philip's that I play in. There's the Greasy Chicken Orchestra, which is 4-piece rhythm, 4-piece horns, playing great old and mouldy music of the jazz genre. I think the range is 1901 to 1935.
Nice.
Is as modern as we get. But then also some of Philip's originals that are sort of written in that style. And if you've heard Philip's originals in that style, they are he likes really obscure tunes too. Really really quirky things. And he writes a bit in that vein. James Greening on sousaphone. How can you go wrong?
Yep.
Myself, Peter Farrer, Philip on soprano, and James Loughnan on Barry. So that's playing at the Foundry next Thursday. It is a rollicking good time. Brilliant soloists all round. Tim Rollinson on guitar and banjo.
Wow.
Yeah. Sousaphone. Peter Dasent on piano, and usually depends on the gig, but usually Nick Cecilia.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, but also a saxophone quartet that Philip had a saxophone quartet for a long time called Snap, with Sandy Evans and Andrew Robson, a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
This is sort of there's a little bit of overlap with that, but the most recent project is Philip's been circling around and involved with the music of Steve Lacy for a very long time, and has a whole bunch of sort of musical connections to Steve. And so we have been recently performing a suite of music which includes the album Saxophone Special, written for saxophone quartet, and then a whole bunch of stuff that Philip has arranged for saxophone quartet for that as well.
Oh, wow.
So did some gigs for that in December. Hopefully there'll be some more coming up with that soon. Greasy Chicken Orchestra is going into the studio shortly.
Nice. Very exciting.
Just waiting on dates for that. So that's one fantastic
That's that one.
project.
I think I was talking to Loretta at work, and I think she went to the Steve Lacy gig in December, and she was saying it was an amazing gig, of course, but also one of the interesting things about it, if you guys ever do get to see it, of course, for those playing at home, he actually, I believe he brings along like a Steve Lacy kind of exhibit, so he has like a collection of documents or records, like really obscure
all
Steve
sorts
Lacy
of things.
memorabilia.
He's got sort of some Steve Lacy sort of general memorabilia. He's got records, a whole bunch of Steve Lacy records, which he sort of brings along, of which, big LP covers, fantastic, lots of great artwork and things to delve into. But I mean, Philip has also recently been published. He's got a book chapter in a book called Steve Lacy Unfinished, which is kind of a collection of it's a pseudo academic book. There are some pieces of academic work in there, and Philip's written one of those chapters. There's memoirs, there's like a whole collection of stuff. It's in English and French and Italian and something else, I think.
Wow.
So it was sort of partly to sort of help launch the book for that as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, really interesting project. Wild music, bizarre, interesting, challenging, amazing.
Nice.
Very, very sort of Thelonious Monk-esque.
Cool. All right. Now, moving on, because obviously there's a lot to talk about. Another group I want to talk about that you're involved with is, I think we mentioned it a bit earlier, Mara.
Yes.
Now, Mara, I believe we talked about as being like a big influence for you, early on, and now you're playing with them.
Yeah.
How's that for, going full circle? So
it's wild. It's beautiful.
It must be pretty surreal. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, you sort of touched on a little bit, like, sort of this world music group, but has, jazz horn players involved in it. Maybe you could tell us a bit about sort of that, a little bit more detail on that, and how'd you get involved with Mara?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lou and Mara, who are married and run the band, they are Australian. Yep. They started off in sort of the Anglo-Celtic sort of folk tradition. Started off with Irish and English sort of folk music band, but fairly early on in the piece, Mara got into Bulgarian music. Ended up going to Bulgaria, studying Bulgarian singing. Did her masters on the science of the Bulgarian calling voice and sticking cameras down people's throats and all that kind of thing, and actually, fully exploring that from a sort of a scientific standpoint. So they have been heavily involved in the quote unquote world music scene for many years, and have travelled, oh my gosh, like so many countries and so many tours and so many ARIA awards, and have really immersed themselves in particularly music of the Balkans. Obviously Bulgarian music is one of their specialties. They also specialise in early music. Lou records and produces a whole bunch of early music albums. So they are really fantastically eclectic musicians. But Lou plays, I think, 18 different kinds of lutes.
Hectic.
Yes. Balamars and bouzouki and mandolins and all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And Mara sings and plays drums, and they've written film music and all the things. But I guess what they're known for in the band is music, particularly of Bulgaria and surrounding regions, Turkey. Perform a lot of Arabic music, that type of thing. Very very much as Australians who have been sort of adopted into that scene. But the Mara band has always been sort of a hybrid. It's always been a sort of a folk jazz crossover. So folk music played by a lot of jazz musicians always in the band, and and it's really sort of a hybrid kind of band. They don't hesitate to put key changes in places where key changes wouldn't usually be, and that type of thing. But just incredible and virtuosic and beautiful, and really doing a lot of service to the music. A lot of a lot of real sort of homage paid to the cultures that they interact with, and they play for a lot of community events, and are heavily involved in sort of the the community scene there. So they were heroes of mine while I was at high school. I just was hoping one day I'd get them to sign an album, and now I get to play with the band, which is pretty fantastic.
Nice.
The thing that I do most regularly with them is because they have done for over 30 years lots of Music of Eva in school shows.
Yep.
So myself, Stuart van der Graaf, who you interviewed last year. Last year? No, end of 2020.
Year before. It's a bit of a blur, but yeah.
So we have a new-ish show that we've been touring through COVID.
Okay.
A little bit in person and a whole bunch online,
right?
Which has been remarkably successful, and Music of Eva have sort of won some awards for that. So that's sort of the thing that I do a lot of all the time. And then the Mara band doing creative concerts is the the crew of horn players is very much Paul Cutland, Sandy Evans, Andrew Robson. Then I've done a bunch of those shows as well. They're currently rehearsing the Mara Big Band project, which is launching at Riverside Theatres at the beginning of March.
Oh, wow.
Which involves James Greening and Sam Golding and the Bulgarian Voices Martinitsa Choir, 14-piece choir, big expanded Mara band, 5-piece horn section. It's a beast. And
huge.
I am... covering a bunch of the horn chairs should anybody not be able to do that, but it's worth mentioning that they're out there and gigging that at the moment. There's a whole bunch of concerts for that coming up in March, which is just going to be fantastic.
Cool. Nice one.
Yeah,
cool. And look, there's a few other projects you work with as well. I mean, look, we could certainly go on and on and on. There's like of the big bands. Like, I mean, obviously big bands are
playing a lot of jazz orchestras.
Yeah, jazz orchestras. Sorry. And there's a few out there, and I mean, they're just starting to re-emerge after a bit of a hiatus, of course.
We did one gig with Dave Panichi's big band in between
recently.
lockdowns. Pre-Delta.
Okay, before the second one. Okay.
Just before Delta hit, I think.
Yeah,
we managed to get in one with Dave Panichi's big band at the Australian Institute of Music. That was a fantastic concert. That was great.
Nice. Yeah, Dave usually gets like the who's who of jazz to play in those orchestras, and it's just the caliber of musician is incredible. So yes, it's definitely an amazing thing, and it tends to be a lot of Dave's music as well, isn't it? Like a lot of his originals and
it's mostly his originals these days. Yeah, he's one of the best big band writers ever to come out of Australia. I mean, he wrote for Buddy Rich for a long time for for a reason.
Yep.
All those famous tapes that he loves hearing about.
Yes.
So look, I'm honoured every time the phone rings for that, and between that, Dan Barnett's big band, I've been involved in bits of Kinetic Jazz Orchestra, bits of Divergence. I haven't had time to fit in Divergence in recent times, but I've done one album with them. Bit of Sydney Jazz Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lots of big bands. Like I sort of consider that to be if I have a home base, that's I guess probably my home base is big bands.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of amazing because everyone says, big bands are dead, but there's a lot of actual big band activity happening right here in Sydney. There's all those bands that you've mentioned, of course, who are quite active, and also
Jeremy Rose's Iron in the Blood.
Yes,
as well.
That's another one. James Ryan has just recently set up one last week. In fact, just debuted. So there's a few like floating around. So yeah, if whoever says big band's dead, nah,
no,
definitely not.
It doesn't pay very well.
Well, yeah, there is that.
A lot of mouths to feed, but it ain't dead.
No.
And I mean, look, one of the most inspiring things happening at the moment too, on the pedagogical end of things, is the big band program at the con is outstanding. They're up to 4 big bands now, and the caliber of players and the level of training that they're getting. I mean, the top big band now at the con is 100% professional charts. They're playing some of the toughest stuff in the repertoire, like James D'Arcy Argue's Secret Society charts and Maria Schneider charts, and just all the toughest things you could possibly play for big band, and that's just like a list of the repertoire that they play.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Exactly. Speaking of which, tonight, I hope everybody's going to Foundry 616 to see Tessie Overmeyer and Ben Lerner play tonight. Two of the young guns at the con, leading their own 2 bands at Foundry. Is man, there's some great players coming out of there, and those 2 are definitely an awesome.
Yeah, no, she's a phenomenal player. Definitely, she's on my list to try and interview here. So fingers crossed I can actually get her when she's not gigging, which is pretty rare.
I don't know what night that would be, but yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, we'll see how we go. But yeah, look, just to sort of wrap up a few things just about your playing career. Like as I said at the start, you've worked with like some. That's a lot of like the local artists that you've worked with, of course. But there's a lot of heavyweights from overseas you've worked with, and different settings and things like that. Is there maybe a standout international artists that you've worked with, and what made it a memorable experience for you?
Yeah, look, I'd say I'll get George Benson out of the way, because that was playing in a section with George Benson. There's a bunch of people who will probably watch this. Some other people that you've interviewed on this were on the gig with me.
Yep.
And less about the fact that it's at the Opera House, more, which is always great, but just watching him do his thing on stage at close quarters and watch him get to sort of the party set at the end of the night and let fly and just forget about playing the charts. Just wanted to sit on stage and just watch George all night, you know. But look, a couple of standouts. One would be playing with Bob Stannard and Chris Kleeman which was when so interestingly enough, because it's something that we haven't sort of mentioned along the way, is that there's this whole other side of my life that for 10 years I taught teenagers to jump off cliffs on skis in Canada.
No, I remember that back in uni. That was sort of your little in between semesters and things. That'd be sort of the thing you go away and do, and it was pretty cool. We were all a bit jealous.
As well you should be. I got to ski a lot.
Yeah.
So I spent 10 years going backwards and forwards between playing music here and teaching skiing in mainly Canada, one season in Vermont. And it was that season in Vermont. So a lot of the coolest musical experiences that I've had have come not via hanging out in the music scene. I mean, obviously, you know, hanging in New York, I mean, you kind of can't go wrong. You sort of, you know, throw a rock, hit somebody, ask them for a jam, and you know, and you'll have an amazing time. You know, it's an amazing city. But some of the most interesting and beautiful musical experiences have come through skiing. So I was working in this tiny little ski town in Vermont, Manchester, Vermont, and somebody told me that there was you know, these two guys who played together who were friends, who one played guitar and one played harmonica, and they played some blues, and they played down at the local pub sort of about a block away down the street, and I should totally check them out. And I went, yeah, great, thanks, yeah, I probably will, yeah. Walked in one night after about a month. It took me about a month to go and see them. They played every Thursday, and walked in and just went like 1932 National Steel guitar and harmonica, and just the most incredible gravelly blues voices.
Wow.
There's these two friends in Vermont. One was the state treasurer of Vermont for a large number of years.
Yeah, right.
And the other guy's a ski race coach. But they also are absolute blues nuts and play with B.B. King.
As you do.
So there's that.
Okay.
And walked in, and they were extremely generous, because I was reasonably young and a bit green at the time, and they you know, saw me walk in with a horn case and sort of sit down, you know, at a table, and they finished the song and they just both stared at me like this, and they went, "So are you getting the horn out or not?" Like, and welcome. Bunch of experiences like that. Yeah, and got it and played, and that was like, and then 3 months later, you know, done a whole bunch of gigs with them, and that being, just incredible musical personalities, incredible musicians, but just incredibly welcoming in terms of into the music, you know, playing in a room with pool going on and all sorts of things, and just us in our little bubble, just going, feed me guys, give me everything you got, I'll take it, you know. So that's one. Probably another one, and this was the gig that happened in Australia, but with Elio Villafranca, the Cuban New York piano player, which was my real sort of proper introduction to Cuban music. I mean, it's his own original suite of music that we played off his album Cinque, and with Gay Bryant's ensemble that she put together to launch that in Australia. So it was him coming out and our ensemble here, and that was just, you know, the story of the music, the story of you know, Cinque was the I think the first freed slave who sort of went to America and sort of won his freedom, if I've got the story correct. And anyway, incredibly powerful music, incredibly powerful story, and just that really, like, I'd played a bunch of Cuban music before in, you know, Cuban big band, you know, Cuban-esque music, but that was sort of the beginning of a connection there. And then that series of concerts that we did with him were really profound and just incredible. And I was playing bass clarinet for the whole thing.
Oh wow!
I thought I was doubling on bass clarinet for some of it, and then the music showed up, and I went, "Oh, it's like this much virtuoso bass clarinet music. Ouch. Okay, never mind. I'll just give myself RSI practicing that. So I did.
Well, good thing you got a nice bass clarinet to do it all in.
I didn't at the time, but I do now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And yeah, I literally wore the posts wobbly in the bottom in my bass clarinet from practicing that music. Anyway, and that really led to, that was sort of, well, it didn't lead to, but then the opportunity presented itself at the beginning of 2019 to go to Cuba with Dan Barnett's big band, and that was just amazing. So we played, we hung, that was fantastic. The gigs that we played were great, but the hanging that we did in between times was even better. So just just hanging out with a couple of particularly sort of amazing Cuban musicians and just being kind of shown the ropes and going, it's okay, we get it, you're from Australia, this is just like, a lot of this is going to go by, but jump in, like, let's give it a go.
Nice. Sounds like some absolutely amazing experiences, and definitely things that a lot of people would definitely give their right leg for, shall we say. To wrap up this component of the Q&A, I want to sort of throw it back to more your mentorship hat, and what I ask is, given there's a lot of young musicians out there who might have recently graduated, or looking to sort of, okay, I want to become a gigging muso and have no idea what to do. What advice from your experiences that you've learned along the way could you share with us in terms of someone wanting to get out there and make a career as a performer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think persistence is key. I'm definitely somebody who chose to do this over other things that I could have done, I'm an example of somebody who is not the most coordinated, is not the most talented, has had to work pretty hard to get, in some arenas, some very basic competent skills on some things, and more proficient in others. So I think that the advice that I would give is to find your why and to build a community around that. So I think ultimately it's really hard from a motivational point of view to stick at being a musician,
mm-hmm.
if you don't have a sense of community surrounding you. It's also really hard to find an artistic voice if you don't sort of involve yourself in a community of people. So, I don't think everybody falls into this trap, but there's certainly the prevalence of the idea that that you work away at your thing, you become good at the thing, and then you rock up, and then you work is around, or people like your thing, and then it tends not to happen like that. The music scene does suffer from a little bit of a lack of a real sense of family, like I have heard older musicians talk about that perhaps it once had, but I don't think that is dead.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is alive and well in the sort of the people who carry the flame in the scene of whatever kind of music, and that ultimately it's about connecting with people. So I think that there's lots of things that you can do along the way, but I think discovering your tribe, discovering people that you can trust, being vulnerable with them, asking for their advice, showing up, going to people's gigs, but not because you want them to give you a gig and see you there and go, "Aha, just what I needed, an avant-garde alto saxophone player." Not so much that, but just because you want to be part of this, and you want to be part of this for the long term. And if you're not sure that you want to be part of it for the long term, just go out and see more stuff. Go out, travel, be greedy, taste lots of music, go to some folk gigs, check out some Turkish music. Your interview with Stuart Van der Graaf was amazing, in the way that he's really, really sort of, that sense of community connection
Yeah.
is really sort of at the core of what he does. And I think, I know that here in this household, we've always tried to sort of make jazz a family. We have people around for dinner and for desserts and for barbecue ribs and for counselling sessions and a spare couch and and all the things, and it comes with, right? And so if you're open to that and you're willing to explore that, I think that's the big piece of advice that I would give, is like, come be part of the community. And if it turns out that one of your greatest heroes that you were hoping would accept you and sort of take you under their wing, it turns out that maybe they're not the nicest human being, that's cool. Go find a different one. There's lots of amazing human beings out there, and the thing that I have almost without exception experienced is that the people at the very, 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 very top of the game are almost universally amazingly generous human beings who just want to be a person in the world just like you do. It's usually the kind of the A- crowd who are all bitter and twisted and trying to lay down the law with people.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And I think it's it goes a long way. Being very open and just be nice, be kind. Definitely. Just
There's so much argy-bargy in the world. Don't add to it. Be part of the solution.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. All right, we're talking with Tim Clarkson. If you are watching at home and you would like to ask Tim a question about anything music related, or even ski instructing related, but mainly saxophone, because it is a saxophone channel, feel free to put that in the chat there, and I'll read it out as we go along. Now, as we're progressing through, I want to talk now about your sort of research fields. Now, currently you're completing a doctorate, but we'll get to that in a second. We just want to touch base on your previous research project, which is your master's, and it was a research topic based on Mark Turner. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was, I believe, analysing the harmonic language of his solos and on a particular album. Is that correct, or is it?
No, not a particular album, but I would say a particular aspect of his soloing. I mean, there's a lot of the brief background to it is essentially that when I sort of really started transcribing Mark and tried to figure out what he was doing, as opposed to David Binney or Chris Potter or Donny McCaslin or a bunch of other players, that I was like, what is it that they're doing? It's crazy. More so than anybody else, I realized that he was really sort of, he wasn't playing in the same sandpit as the other kids.
Okay.
He was working with some fundamental building blocks of music that just was not the same old stuff, the same old language, sort of rearranged just incredibly virtuosically. Not that all, I'm not saying that those other guys are, but more so than any of them, he had something going on that was just like, there are notes here that really shouldn't be working, and it's amazing. And we've got major sevenths on dominant chords and like all just, I was very confused. And so I really needed to figure out sort of what was going on. So it was essentially just exploring chromatic thirds relations. So, all kinds of sort of symmetrical major third and minor third related harmonic devices. So not doing like a stylistic analysis of his entire playing, but just these particular bits, like where something really insane is going on and it's really kind of departed from standard jazz language that is very unique to him. What is that crazy thing that he is playing? And I found that there was some systematic things going on, and didn't get much further in the masters than typifying what those are, how they occur over different sort of harmonic contexts and that kind of thing. But
okay. But it was like the first time someone sort of actually picked up. Well, I mean, they would have picked up on it, but first time actually sort of went into a full academic research on.
Yeah, there's only one other at the time. There was only one other piece of academic research on Mark Turner, which was more of a sort of a stylistic kind of, how he's similar to Warren Marsh.
Right.
Okay. No,
Cool. Now, recently you have undertaken a doctorate.
Whose idea was that, Nathan? I have
Well, just speaking from experience, I was going to say it's either congratulations or condolences. It's like everyone else I know, including myself. You always start off with good intentions, but by the end of it, you start pulling your hair out, or you just lose the plot a little bit. But you do get there in the end. So, what's your current research on, and where are you sort of up to with it at this stage?
Cool.
If you're allowed to talk about it, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. It's changed. It's, as these things do. If you do research well, it usually changes, because usually your initial idea has a kernel of something good, and then a whole bunch of other stuff that's like, yeah, you might be barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
So essentially, what I'm investigating is, and this is as a DMA program, so it's slightly fewer words with some creative output as well. And essentially what I'm investigating is outside or moments of playing a part, where people are playing outside the chord changes, or in disagreement with each other. Because this is the thing, is as soon as you sort of start to investigate, particularly a modern jazz sense of playing outside the chord changes, it's not like everybody else is sitting there like a Jamie Aebersold sort of backing track playing the chord changes and you're doing wacky stuff over here. It's never that simple. It's and the best kind of music is always very interactive, and there's negotiation going on. So it's essentially investigating how those moments of outsidedness are created and negotiated between band members. And in order to sort of illuminate that, my torch, if you like, that I'm sort of shining on, that is using Neo-Riemannian theory.
Hey.
Those won't be anything new to true music theory geeks out there, but Neo-Riemannian theory essentially uses maths and geometry. Basically, music. Harmonic information can behave in ways that can be described geometrically. You can do that mathematically. You can have pretty pickies dancing around the page. I like the pretty pickies dancing around the page. So I'm using animations, and traditional Neo-Riemannian theory is heavily focused on harmonic units, and in a nice, easy to understand ways, particularly suited to triads. That works out nice and neatly for Liszt and Wagner and those kind of people. But it's a particularly handy thing to... I've found it beneficial to sort of map visually how people take different paths through pitch space, if you like, to arrive at a point, whatever that point be, diving back into the harmony, a point of agreement, wherever it is that they're sort of meeting up. And the different paths that they take, and who initiates those events, who leads, who follows, and how that sort of flows, how ripples sort of flow through the band.
Nice. All right. Well, can't wait for the finished research to be published and out there, and check it out. So how long you got left on it, do you reckon? Maybe
about a year and a half. I've done 2 years, but I went part-time second half of last year to preserve the sanity, and so that'll extend it a little bit, so about a year and a half.
Okay, cool. Well, all the best with that. I really do feel for you being there, done that. But yes, it is a monumental topic, and it sounds like a really interesting topic as well. Complicated, but that's what doctoral research is. It's got to be something really,
As people have said to me, they don't give them away.
No, exactly. Got to work for those. Now, going on to another field. Again, if you do have any questions for Tim, please, don't be shy. Tim is a very, open book, and he's very much happy to answer any questions that you might have. So if you do have any questions or queries or anything like that, you are more than welcome to drop in the chat on the YouTube stream on the right there. But we'll continue on. Next, I want to talk about your educational work. Now, you... in conjunction with everything else that you do, you're also an amazing educator. Currently doing some work at the Con, Sydney Conservatorium. And you do, obviously, performance stuff as well, but also lecturing recently as well, I hear. So
starting to do a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. What are you lecturing at the moment? Well, what will you be lecturing? Sorry.
I have just found out that I will be assisting doing some of the sort of the musicological setup for an education subject for teaching jazz in secondary schools.
Nice.
So there's a big practical sort of element to that. Somebody else has got control over that, and I'm going to be helping do the what on earth is jazz, and let's sort of understand what it is that we're trying to do and where this music comes from. I think for the setup for that, that's about as much as I can tell you at the moment, because I'm finding out the details myself shortly.
That's right. You got a couple of weeks before uni starts, so plenty of time to look it up. But yeah, I imagine that would be more for like the classical stream or player, or is that open to any education?
It's education.
Yep.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that gradually these boundaries are eroding, which is fantastic. But I think the majority of people doing music education in Australia, more often than not, come from a classical background.
Yep.
So I think there's a bunch of demystifying that whole process that is fantastic to do, and amazing people like James Humberston and others, Alex Hone and various others, doing incredible work in the education department at the con. Some moving and shaking going on. Cool. But yeah, I'm also a tutor for a sort of a first year intro to musicology, kind of crack the egg open on sort of critical thought kind of subject, and
Nice.
take some sectionals with the saxophone players, working on doubling, and
Cool. All right. So yeah, definitely an all-rounded teaching portfolio. That's for sure, which is cool. Now,
jack of all trades, doubler.
True. But hey, we've all, we all, being, gigging musicians, it's something that, just we add a feather to the cap, and, that just gives you another avenue to explore. As you say, just sort of opens doors to, a whole array of different things, having your foot in different areas like that, doubling.
Absolutely.
Now, you're, being an educator and a mentor yourself, how would you describe your teaching philosophy? Like, what's your kind of method to your madness, to put it in a loose term?
Plenty of madness, I'll give you that. My number one method is fit as many "so is your face" or so is my face" jokes into every lesson as possible. Anybody who's had lessons with me will know that for a fact. It's all about that. Look, my big philosophy teaching wise, and I'm a very passionate teacher. I'm a very passionate educator. I can't help myself. I've got an award-winning educator for a mother, and I think I just got bred that way. I'm absolutely all about the pedagogy and passing it all on. So I'd say my big teaching philosophy is just coaching, teaching self-coaching skills. So whether it's like, I'm talking like primary, secondary, tertiary, doesn't matter. It's all about equipping students with the skills to be able to self-identify where their weakness is, and have a toolkit to be able to address that, and really sort of feel confident in coaching themselves through any musical situation that has at least bits that they recognize, be that written bits on the page that they recognize, like if you recognize all the symbols on the page, we can do this, through to really sort of navigating that sort of artistic process. And it's like, yeah, but what do I practice? The age old question: how do you systematically practice making stuff up on the spot? Yep.
Cool. If there was one thing that you wanted your students to take away from your classes or your lessons, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think.
Well, apart from obviously the stuff you taught, that's obviously would be nice to take away.
Yeah, well, I think I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit already. In that, the big thing that I would want all of my students to walk away from is a sense of empowerment, that they have a place in the world, that they have something to offer. And that if they apply themselves intelligently and with an open mind and an open heart, that they have it within them to navigate that course and be curious about the world and go and find whatever it is that they need to know. If they don't have it, they can go find it, and empower them to do that.
Nice. Wise words indeed. Now, we're coming to the tail end of the interview, so again, if you do have any questions, now's the time, better now or never, or you can always shoot Tim an email, or say hello to him at a gig, that's even better. But coming to the tail end of our Q&A here, just sort of discussing, the hottest topic for the last couple of years has been the pandemic, COVID-19. Now, everyone knows by now it's certainly taken the music industry across the planet into a bit of disarray, essentially shutting down, and musicians trying to find ways to sort of keep going, keep afloat, both financially, artistically, mental health, well-being. There's been a lot of downsides to it, but there's been some interesting developments. The development of online content is something as well. But in terms of like your own experiences with the pandemic, and particularly like the period with the lockdowns where there were no gigs and we were able to stay inside, what was some things that you sort of learnt and did during this time that you think might be of benefit to sort of share in terms of like people who might still be struggling to sort of find their feet recovering from particularly the most recent lockdown? Like I know the music's starting to sort of re-emerge now, but there's I think we were talking before, there's a lot of trepidation.
There's a lot of fatigue. Like,
yes.
And this is not just the music scene. Like, I think that's something that in the music scene, I mean, look, we're at the front lines. We're at the coal face of sort of, losing our toes from the shovel coming down. But there are people just be aware. Look, a handful of people have had a great time and had lots of time on their hands, and it's been good for them. Mm-hmm. They're in the minority, but they're out there. I've met some. But people in a wide range of professions, like a really wide range of professions, particularly this last Christmas, have never been in more desperate need of a break, and didn't get one, and spent it either in isolation, caring for family, with COVID themselves, whatever it was, unable to visit relatives, all sorts of things. I've nightmare stories, not related to musicians. So I think just to realize that we're not alone, that other people have also had a really horrendous time of it at various points, and just to know that other people are finding a way through, and they've got an ebb and flow, and you can too. And it's excellent that you mentioned mental health. I mean, my mental health during COVID has been rough. It's been rough. I've needed some help with that, and I've reached out and got the help that I need, and all those kind of things. And I just I want to say that on a public forum to make sure that it's said, so that other people can go, oh my gosh, other people really struggle too. And yes, other people really struggle. And I think there are a bunch of positives that we can take out of the situation. I think it's also really important to acknowledge that it's just been hard, and we're just all very, very tired. Yeah. And we all, tend to get our energy back at different points. Person beside you may have theirs and you don't have yours, and that's okay. But like in terms of lessons learned,
yep.
I think one is I think it's made a lot of people think really about why they want to do what they want to do. So the people who are going to come out the other end of this still doing performing arts are going to be people who have a reason. People who have a vision, and that's kind of exciting. This might be not, coming to fruition right this very second, but that's going to be an interesting community to be a part of. Is those who've found a way through, stayed the course. I mean, it sort of sounds like a value judgment that if you. There's lots of people that I love and respect have just gone, yeah, that's enough for right now. Like, I'm going to go get another job. And that's great, and they're doing that, supporting their families, and blossoming onto other things. So to allow room for that process, and to find your why, but also realize that sometimes it takes a bit of time to find your why you want to do your thing, or why you don't want to do it anymore, or why you want to do a parallel thing, or why you want to go into arts administration, or why you want to do a law degree, or whatever sort of path that takes you is 100% valid, worthwhile, and of value to humanity for a whole bunch of reasons that you and I can bring to our own journeys. I think that the technological thing is, it's a double-edged sword, like all technological things are.
Yep.
But I'm really excited about, hopefully I'm going to be doing some concerts in the next little while, doing a little bit of remote duo stuff
Oh, yeah?
through Dan Tepfer's exciting new website, Farplay, bringing the technology of jack trip to at this stage just a duo format, just two streams, but like minimum latency, actually being able to play sort of live improvised duos over the net and fit that into sort of our landscape.
Cool.
Over the next while. One of the big things has been Musica Viva in Schools was one of the first organisations, and they've won a bunch of awards for this, for adapting very early in the piece to the online environment. And so over the last 2 years, we did 3 weeks of touring in person at Western New South Wales, and the whole rest of that time we've done, I don't even know, like 250 concerts online. And whilst that is not ideal, it has allowed us to reach into some amazing communities that never could have afforded to be part of the touring program for us to be there. Remote kids in the Northern Territory, like live teaching us their local language as part of the show to us, and being, like really just having this incredibly connective experience because they've managed to make that change and take advantage of what's there. So I do think the online platform, the online concert scenario it's going to be here to stay. Hopefully in person, and that personal connection will still be the centerpiece of music. But this has really sort of kicked us in a direction that the music scene was kind of going.
Yeah,
anyway,
just sort of fast tracked it a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that sort of brings me on to my next question, and I think you sort of already touched on this already, was that just sort of asking about this music scene here in Sydney. I know you talked about, how, those technological platforms you believe are going to be here to stay, and, it's very probable because, things like Australian Digital Concert Hall, for instance, is a platform that looks like it's going to be around for a while, and of course Musica Viva and outreaching with the use of technology and video and the way things are developing. But I mean, for you, how would you like to see the scene sort of develop and sort of adapt to this? Do you see like sort of this obviously a continuation of the incorporating technology in there, or do you think eventually we're going to go back to where we were before, or is it going to be like the last pandemic where we end up in like the roaring 20s and like a quasi renaissance almost?
I don't know. I wish I had the answer to that, and I wish I had the answer to how precisely we're going to integrate the technological lessons that we've learnt into sort of a long-term sort of sustainable trajectory. I think like all things in life, it will probably be bumpy rather than smooth. The pandemic's not over by any stretch of the imagination, though exactly what form it's going to take from now on, who knows? We've been at this point enough times to not think that we know what's coming next. Though fingers crossed with the way that we've dealt with things and vaccinations, and we are on some kind of path out of things. I don't pretend to know exactly what that's going to look like, but I hope that through some hard-won lessons during the pandemic, we've learnt the value of community and that value of connection. And that those periods in between lockdowns where it was like the roaring 20s, I mean, man, the scene was, when we were back down to zero COVID there for a while, it was pumping, and people were so happy to be out, and I was so happy to be out. It was just, connecting with people like that was incredible. So somewhere in between the fatigue that we experience, the hope that we have for connecting with people, and I think the technology can help us bridge that gap. So what I think we have the potential to do is to take the most meaningful of those technological interactions, the things that can be built into people's lives, the things that increase rather than decrease connections between people. I think if we can leverage the best sort of 40% of the technological advantages, we have the capacity to do things like do an online concert and sort of stop in between tunes and chat to the audience and have people sort of chipping in and going, what was that thing that you just played? Or, oh my gosh, how did you come up with that composition? Or like, you know, what is that harmony? Or, you know, and actually that's actually in a lot of respects more connective than your average, say, concert at a jazz club. You know, and it's one of the things that I really enjoyed doing about the Airbnb concerts while we were doing them, is they were very intimate. Sometimes we did them in a round, but really invited the audience in and just went, that's right. Like, not only do we, you know, encourage you to ask questions, but there's going to be like a whole segment of this gig where we're just going to respond to things that you ask. And, you know, yeah, increasing those connections between musicians and between musician and audience. I mean, I don't think that can possibly go wrong if that's front and center of whatever solutions we employ. Got to, you know, adapting to the change is scary but important.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways, is that you know, you can't be stagnant. Like, you know, the approach that we had, you know, 3-4 years ago. You know, as you say, we need to adapt and, you know, adjust and, you know, find ways to continue what we do, but, you know, work around, you know, what's out there. And, you know, that's the beauty of music and a lot of other things as well. Like, it's, you know, there's constantly evolutions and the way things develop and grow, and that's how we find new and exciting things. And, you know, hopefully, you know, something new and some more new and exciting things come from a lot of this. Yeah, wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We've come to the tail end of the interview. Sorry, got a little bit deep there, but, you know, it's interesting question to sort of get people's perspective on, you know, what they would like to see happen. And, you know, it's important because, you know, it's, you know, we are rebuilding, and it's going to be an interesting rebuild, and I think it's going to be a very positive time. I think, hopefully, if nothing else goes horribly wrong, but I think there's going to be a lot of good things happening. But we've come to the tail end. Tim, thank you very much for your time and
thank you for your
sharing
patience.
Your thoughts.
My gosh.
No worries. It's always great to have a chat and, of course, a catch-up as well, because it has been quite a while since we've been face-to-face. And it's, yeah, absolutely amazing. But one last question, and this is something I do ask everyone.
I know what this one is.
Yeah, it's a good one. If you had 10 minutes of practice, what would it be and why?
Absolutely. I love this question. I think it is a brilliant question. And this is sort of part of you know, part of what I teach and how I teach. And once again, always should listen to my own advice, you know, more often. But specifically because the way that your brain adapts to stimulus and the way that neuroplasticity works is that the two most crucial things for developing muscle memory and for developing sort of capabilities over time is how often and how focused. So every day, hyper focus. Notice I didn't mention how much time. So times are nice to have, but the first two are what count.
Yep.
So I have actually done. I've done 6-minute practice challenges with students. I've done 4-minute practice challenges with students. I get a lot lower than 10.
Wow.
Going, really? You're telling me you don't have time to practice? Okay. How about 3? How about 3 minutes? They're like, oh, you're just joking now. I'm like, no, actually, I'm deadly serious. Like, you seriously don't have 3 minutes. So what I would practice, a couple of minutes of long tones, but with a specific focus. So long tones, particularly because it affects sound, projection, tone, intonation, all of those things are sort of all interconnected with throat cavity. So long tones with either pitch bending, overtones, you know, some kind of intonation exercise, some kind of, you know, tuning your octaves, tuning overtones, some kind of applied long tone exercise where you're working throat cavity and finding tension and unlocking it, even if it's just like, you know, pitch bends on a single note. Something that notes that are close together, so some kind of scale pattern. I don't like practicing scales for the sake of scales, particularly as an improviser. They're nice to have, but they're not that useful in their original form. So some kind of pattern, make up a different one every day on notes close together, something with notes further apart. Could be arpeggios, could be chords broken into intervals, could be, something with notes further apart. Do, a minute or so of each of those. Then I would go something that's either an ear training challenge or a learning a piece of repertoire challenge. So I would go that one half of that one bar that you always fumble and putting those notes in every possible combination and just working either raw muscle memory on those note combinations, or flip the script a little, just a raw ear training exercise. Just stick on a record and go, right, learn that bar by ear, go, you probably only have time to do a bar, and you go, great,
cool.
And then 1 minute at the end of something that is free and creative and pushing your own boundaries, and you have no idea what it's going to be. That's what I would do in my 10 minutes. I would break it up between those things.
Wow, that's probably the most intense 10 minutes of practice I've heard. It's great though. Like, there's so many things can fit in there, and it's just as you say, like, it's all about the sort of focus, right? Like, just sort of
level of focus and every day. So like, so the reason that I say sort of that kind of structure is that if you seriously only had that 10 minutes every single day for weeks at a time, you might not be able to make very fast progress, but you could make musical progress with a practice routine that stretches your brain in those particular ways and addresses those particular sort of technique issues.
Very cool, very cool. All right, well, Tim, thank you very much. Now, if we want to keep posted on what's happening with Tim Clarkson, you do have a few things coming up. As you did say, you have a gig next week with the Greasy Chicken.
That's the main thing, sort of with a firm date on it coming up.
Yep, but there are a few other things possibly in the pipeline. What's the best way to sort of keep in touch with what's happening with Tim? Absolutely.
As dreadfully out of date as my website is on a bunch of things, if you go to timclarksonmusic.com and go to the mailing list tab and chuck in an email address there, so that's one of my tasks for tomorrow. Send out an email.
Nice.
Join the mailing list there. That's probably the easiest way to stay in touch with the cooler end of the things that I do that I think are sort of worth sort of foisting on the public.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll post a link to that on the video. So if for those watching now or later on, you can just click that link and subscribe to the mailing list there. But anyway, I don't want to take any more of your time. But Tim, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and everything. And absolute pleasure to catch up and just pick your brains. It's always great and very interesting as well.
As I said, Nathan, I'm always up for a good chat.
That's all good. Well, anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in. I do hope you have an enjoyable rest of your week. And next month we will have another Q&A, just finalizing some details. But I will post an ad thing for that and an event on the Facebook group once things are confirmed. But yes, planning to continue a monthly Q&A, but you can always watch the previous ones on the channel for the last couple of years, and some fantastic people, and including Tim. But yes, it's hopefully a useful resource for